Life in Victoria was turned upside down during the 1850s as thousands upon thousands of men arrived to seek their fortunes at the newly discovered goldfields. The gold rush was a time of hope, a time when any hard-working man could strike it rich through the efforts of his endeavours, regardless of his previous position in life. Huge nuggets were being pried from the earth, pans and cradles were full of gold, and new rich fields were being discovered all the time. But it wasn't all gold and glory. For every miner who struck it rich, there were plenty of others who laboured tirelessly, only to find nothing at the bottom of their shafts. Worse still, drownings, cave-ins and freak accidents were a regular occurrence in the mines. Alcohol and inexperience contributed to many mining deaths, and plenty of others occurred due to unforeseeable circumstances. This was a period in Australia's history when the words tragic accident and buried alive were printed far too commonly in the newspapers. Our cemeteries are filled with the graves of unfortunate men who met their end underground. A riveting first-hand recollection of a Ballarat miner describes many local mining accidents, including several miraculous escapes. His story was published in several newspapers in 1858, and it demonstrates just how common these accidents were on the goldfields, with a single miner able to recall so many incidents from his time so far at the diggings. I've always found this recollection to be absolutely fascinating, so I'd like to share it with you here in full. Recollections of Mining Accidents by a Ballarat Miner. Many have been the deaths from mining accidents, but some instances of escape are among the most miraculous things I ever heard of. I remember about 3 or 4 years long, a man who had been working alongside of me on Golden Point was working a hole on Bakery Hill, I think. Uncommonly deep it was for those days. I believe it was the deepest hole on Ballarat at the time. Well, he was on the watch. He had been below the first shift and I had come up for supper, but being very tired, he took a seat on the bucket which was standing near the mouth of the shaft and somehow dozed off to sleep. Presently one of the men called out, "Bill, ain't you for any supper?" "All right," says he, "I'll come directly." But poor fellow, he was too sleepy and went nodding again with his head right over the shaft. He got drowsier and nodded head foremost down. The men heard him go and rushed to the windlass, and you may fancy their astonishment a second or two after to hear him sing out, in a rather faint voice certainly, "Heave up." Yes, Bill had tumbled down a hole about 170 feet and was comparatively unhurt. Certainly his head and back were bruised, for in going down he had performed a succession of somersaults, striking his head and back all the way down. I don't think Bill ever went to sleep on the stage again. I've felt rather shy of a seat on the bucket myself since. But that was nothing to the man on the white horse, in number 6 I think it was. They had just bottomed and were putting up a whim. The hole was about 260 feet deep. This man, I forgot his name, was doing something to the poppet heads over the shaft, when all at once his foot slipped and down he tumbled straight. He fell clear and did not touch either side. He went plump to the bottom. One of the well boards was on and the bucket was standing on it, which he just struck with his chest and fell in the well where there was a foot or two of the water. Of course, we thought he must be stone dead, but he was not. They got him up and Dr. Kenworthy was soon on the spot. The only serious injury the man had sustained was a fracture of the chest bone. In a short time he was quite recovered. Another wonderful escape took place on the Frenchman's Lead, just on the brow of Sebastopol Hill. A man was drawing slab in a hole near the Malakoff. He was taking them out upwards and had got to within 100 feet of the top. Most of the ground was dry rock and the space behind the slabs was filled up with loose stone and rubbish. He was standing on a stage which was hanging by 2 ropes. Well, the man was incautious enough to tear off the battens from the slabs for some distance up, I think all the way. The consequence was that as soon as he got out of the clay into the rock, there was nothing to hold the slabs up, and 30 or 40 feet came rattling down on him like a shot. Slabs, dirt and stones, some of them 200 or 300 weight, filled up the shaft for several feet, and of course nothing could be seen or heard of the poor chap below. This occurred about noon, just after he had come back from dinner. Of course, a crowd was soon on the spot, and to work they set, getting out the stuff so as to get at the poor fellow's body. After a few hours' work, however, they found out that he was still alive, and to the utter astonishment of everybody, about 11 o'clock he was got up, very little hurt after being for upwards of 10 hours buried under several tons of rock and dirt. The fact was that the slabs had formed a sort of arch over him and kept off the greater part of the weight. It was awfully dangerous work getting the stuff out, for there was a very large quantity hanging in a most dangerous position, and they had to swing a man halfway down the shaft to guide the bucket, for a single touch would have brought down another 20 feet on the 2 men below. It has always struck me as strange that so few accidents of a fatal nature have occurred in blasting, especially when the total inexperience of almost all the men in any work of the nature is taken into consideration. I think there was only one man killed in this way on Ballarat, and that was on the gravel pits. There were a good many accidents on Frenchman's and Whitehorse, but none of them were fatal in their results. The most serious occurred in the Redan claim, number 50, Frenchman's. 2 men were charging a hole. They had got it half taped up when off it went. The man who was holding the tamping iron, Andrew Douglas was his name, got the most hurt. He was entirely blinded, with one eye quite destroyed and the sight of the other gone, though the eye itself was left. His arm and hand were frightfully scorched and mutilated, and 2 or 3 fingers were broken. He was a long while in a very precarious state, but eventually he recovered his health, but I believe he has never got back his sight. The other man was not so badly injured. I myself was once down a hole when a shot went off. We were boring out one that had missed fire. We had got out the tamping, fortunately, and were just bursting the cartridge when it exploded. I never shall forget the blaze of intense light that burst upon my eyes as I rolled back, stunned for the instant from the thick darkness that followed. My first impression was that I was blinded. However, on getting to the surface I found I was unhurt, and so was my mate. We were so black, as chimney sweeps, our eyes smarting dreadfully, but after a wash we went down, recharged the shot and fired it off. Some few deaths have occurred from ropes breaking, but not so many as might be supposed. The most extraordinary was the case at the gravel pit. The poor fellow was killed on the spot. It is supposed that the rope had got burnt with vitriol. At least that was the only way the circumstance could be accounted for. It caused a good deal of alarm at the time, and for a long while afterwards men always tested new ropes before a man was trusted on them. Another rope breaking occurred on the Terrible Lead. It was rather singular. Buckets of dirt and men had gone up on it all day long, and just at the close of the day's work it broke with an empty bucket, which fell right on the man's head. He was dead before they got him out of the hole. The men would not work the claim after, and the lead got deserted a time and was not retaken up for 2 or 3 years. It was a terrible duffer anyhow. Every ounce of gold got from it cost £20, I'll swear. I hope you found these recollections from the 1850s as interesting as I did. If you'd like to see more videos like this one, let me know by hitting the like button. Don't forget to subscribe to Goldfields Guide on YouTube.